Таны төлөө эх орн чинь юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуухаас өмнө та өөрөө эх орныхон төлөө юу хийж чадах вэ гэж асуу. Young Federal Training. Сайн байцгаана уу хүнд үзэгчдээ. Өнөөдөр манай defacto нэвтрүүлгийн зочноор Английн иргэн мэргэжилтэн Stewart Pirnie гэж хүнийг урьж оролцуулж байна.
Stewart K Pirnie 1958 онд Шотландд төрсөн эхнэр нэг охинтой. 1971-ээс 1977 онд Kirkcaldy ахлах сургуульд суралцсан төгссөн. 1977-оос 1980 онд Шотландын Эдинбургийн их сургуулийг худалдааны бакалавр зэрэгтээ төгссөн. Эдийн засаг, бизнесийн судалгаа, нягтлан бодох, санхүү хөрөнгө оруулалт, худалдааны эрх зүйн чиглэлээр судалгаа хийж байсан. Цанаар гулгах, явган аялах, дөөрийн болон сонгодог хөгжим сонсох дуртай. 2003 оноос хойш Төв болон Зүүн Европ, Төв болон Өмнөд Америкийн улс орнуудын лизингийн үйлчилгээ эрхэлдэг компаниудад үйл ажиллагааны стратеги боловсруулах, лизингийн үйлчилгээтэй холбоотой хуулийн төсөл боловсруулах чиглэлээр зөвлөгөө өгсөн. Одоогоор Агко корпорацийн хятад, Казахстан, Монгол дахь үйл ажиллагааг хариуцсан ажиллаж байна.
Thank you, Stewart, for coming.
Great pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.
As our program usually goes on, before at the beginning of everything, I would like to ask you to tell us a bit about you, about your school, where you have been studying, school, living, please.
Okay. I was born in Scotland and still live there. I say I still live there because I don't get home very often, because my life today is very much travelling. But I was born in Scotland in 1958, which was a good year. I think you would agree with that, JD. And I went to school in Scotland, and I went to the same school as the ex-Prime Minister of the UK, Gordon Brown.
Wow.
We went to the same school together. And then we went, not together, he was older than me. And then we went to the same university. We went to Edinburgh University. He was a few years ahead of me as well.
Edinburgh.
Edinburgh University, yeah. Beautiful city. I recommend that you visit Edinburgh someday. And I got my university degree there in commerce. And I didn't know what to do. So I had a degree, and I didn't know what job I wanted to do. But I had a feeling I wanted it to do with money. And I also quite liked the idea of being a salesperson as well. And that's what I did. I got into the business of selling money. So I got into the leasing business. And I started working with a small leasing company in Scotland. And honestly, I didn't like it.
Why?
It wasn't the business. I enjoyed the business. I just didn't enjoy the management style of the company. It was very inward-looking. Nobody was allowed to be creative. There was too much control. And I didn't like the sector that I was working in, which was the car and truck and caravan sector. And then I was very fortunate. I got asked to join another leasing company, which focused on leasing agricultural equipment. And this was a subsidiary of one of the biggest banks in the UK called Barclays Bank. And I loved it. I just absolutely loved it. I felt privileged some days that I was given a nice car to drive about in the beautiful countryside in Scotland, visiting lovely customers who were the farmers, talking about their business, their crops, the weather, their livestock. And also I was making money from doing this as well.
Stuart, you know, I had several meetings with, I had met several people from Scotland.
Uh-huh.
But we in Mongolia refer to the United Kingdom or England, and you suddenly all the time you talk like a separate country. Why is that? I mean, consistently like this. Why?
I always say to people that the United Kingdom is a bit of a misnomer.
Okay.
Because there's not much united about the United Kingdom.
Okay.
So we have the Scots, we have the English, we have the Welsh, and then of course we have people from Northern Ireland as well, or Ulster as some people call it. Ulster.
Okay.
No, that is the other name of it. Ulster, yes. Okay. It's an accepted name. And we really don't particularly like each other. And everybody, of course, doesn't like the English. Well, that's the story. That's the story. I think it's the big brother attitude. That if you are living in a country that's a small country, which Scotland is. It's quite a tiny country. We've got about 5 million people that live there. So we don't have a big voice. And we've got a big brother called England.
Okay.
And probably the English were smarter than the Scots. So they tend to dominate the Scots.
You have a good whiskey.
Well, we're the only country in the world that really does produce whiskey. Other countries,
okay.
other countries think that they do, like Ireland and Canada and America, and Japan as well. But no, Scotland is the only country that makes whiskey properly.
So you went to a bank-related leasing company, and what's the difference between a leasing company alone or a bank-related leasing company?
Well, I think the way that the leasing sectors have developed over the years is that setting up a leasing company is relatively easy in most countries. It's not regulated. And part of the reason that it's not regulated is that leasing companies don't take deposits from private individuals.
Like bank.
Correct. So I am 100% supportive of banks being regulated because they protect the man in the street, the woman in the street. But leasing companies borrow money from banks. Or other potential investors. So they should not be regulated. Or if they are regulated, they should be regulated in a very gentle manner. They can provide reports to state organisations, to the government. I don't have a problem with that. So the leasing companies have just got that bit more freedom than banks do.
So how long you have been working in leasing industry, tell me, in practice? Yes.
I graduated when I think I was 22, so I've been in the business now for 30 years.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the only industry that I know.
So then you start to work more internationally.
Yes.
How it happened?
I moved to England.
Okay.
So I was a Scotsman that moved to England.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I made some very good friends there. Yeah. I'm not one of these Scots that bash the English all the time. I really do like the English. And part of my job was to go to other countries and develop the company that I was working for. At that time, the company I was working for was a joint venture between a Dutch leasing company and a company called Massey Ferguson, who a lot of people know make tractors. That company now is owned by AGCO, A-G-C-O, AGCO, which is a big American organisation. And I was asked if I would first of all go and help set up a subsidiary in Ireland, which is a different country from the United Kingdom.
Okay.
Which I did, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. I'm very fortunate, and I know this may sound terribly patriotic, but I believe it's true, that Scottish people are welcomed around the world. I think hopefully our sense of humour usually travels. Some countries it doesn't. And people think that we're open. Also, we are particularly welcome in small countries that have big neighbours as well. So when I went to Ireland, there's a great camaraderie, friendship between the Scots and the Irish. We're Gaelic people.
Yes.
And we like each other. And traditionally we dislike the English. But so we like each other. So I set up the company in Ireland, which is still operating today very successfully. And then I got asked to go to Spain. And I set up a company in Spain. And then my big move was when I was asked to become the CEO of a new Polish leasing company.
In Poland?
In Warsaw, yeah, based in Warsaw. Which was a big move for me.
When?
That's a good question, that was in 1997. So it was a good 10 years after the breakup of the Soviet Union, after Perestroika. But the business was still, it was like stepping back a generation. And
a generation?
A whole generation. So it was like moving into the land of opportunity. And I realised then that I enjoyed working in the East, that I enjoyed working in countries that were developing, countries whose economies were building up, but very, very quickly. And I got great satisfaction from that. The problem about leasing, I think, is that we are fundamentally a one-product business. And because
all
leasing,
around the world?
All around the world. Well, we've got one product, which is leasing. And we split it into two types, financial lease and operating lease. but it's very simple. And because it's so simple, everything that can be done with leasing has been done. But when we move into more developing countries, because the sector is still very new, it means that we can develop the country and the companies, the leasing companies, with very simple products.
How important leasing was for Poland's economy at that time?
I think that's an excellent question to ask me, because I love being asked that question, not just about Poland, but other developing countries. I told you I've been in this business 30 years. I am still evangelical about leasing. I believe in this product. And I believe in the product because it is so good for a nation. It creates wealth. It develops the economy. It builds a nation. It creates employment. It generates taxes, which generate wealth. Leasing companies expand, which generates employment. Leasing companies lend business to small companies, which become medium-sized companies. So that creates employment. Medium-sized companies become big companies, which again generates employment and generates taxes.
Leasing helps private companies to grow with relatively less cash otherwise they could spend for, right?
Absolutely.
Please explain us what is that, how it is done.
Well, this worked in Poland. You specifically asked me about Poland, and I guess I didn't answer specifically about Poland because I was just being too enthusiastic about leasing in general. But the critical thing about leasing is that's why I think it's such a perfect financial product. That you want to buy a truck to help grow your business. And if you go to the bank will always say to you, what collateral do you have? I need some collateral. I need some wealth I need to understand that this is my security. So small companies don't have much cash. They need cash flow. They need working capital to pay their debtors, their creditors. I always get them mixed up. But with leasing, what we say to you is, you want the truck? Okay, we need some information from you, some background information, some financial information. That looks good. You want the truck is our security. That's the only collateral we want. And how we reduce our risk is quite simple. We ask you to give us what we call a down payment. And depending on your strength, we will make it a big down payment or a smaller down payment. But it could be, say, on average 20 to 30%. So for 20 or 30% of the truck's value, you get the truck today. You are going to use that truck for the next 3, 4, 5 years. You pay for it over the next 3, 4, 5 years. It generates income for you, and out of that income that is generated, you pay the leasing payments to the leasing company. Everybody's happy. That's why I think it's a perfect form of finance.
In Poland, what was the interest rate at that time? I remember that time in particular well.
Gosh, we were lending money in the local currency at about 40%. 40.
40, wow.
40%.
Way higher than even in Mongolia.
It was.
What was the reason why it was the high? Deposit is expensive, or?
It was partly because inflation was terrible. It was partly because the local currency wasn't particularly strong at that time. But we were also lending money. This was 1997. This was pre-euro. So we were also lending money in Deutschmarks, Swiss francs, French francs, Italian lira, hard currency leases. And even then, the interest rate was still 15% in those higher currencies, because the risk in Poland was much higher.
So this interest rate is not only related with the saving rate of banks from which you are borrowing, but also with the risk of businesses in that country.
Indeed.
And what is behind it, with which other variables it is connected?
Well, the critical thing is default. That when we lend as leasing companies, when we lend money, we expect to get it back. However, we look at the customer sector and we decide how risky it's going to be. And the sectors vary from time to time. Like in Europe at the present moment, for example, the construction sector is particularly risky because people are not moving offices, people are not moving houses. So these construction companies have got half-finished projects. So just now the construction sector is difficult. But